Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media myths. I'm Peter Lavelle. Well, Susan Rice is on the short list to become Joe Biden's vice presidential candidate. How in the world did it come to this? And what does it say about foreign policy? It truly is bipartisan. Susan Rice will echo the neoconservatives' predilections for up to 4 years if she's in office. And who knows what happens to Joe Biden if he will even survive a term in office. All right, to discuss this and more, I'm joined by Daniel McAdams. He is the executive director of the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. And we have George Szamuely. He's an author, commentator, and a co-founder of this YouTube channel. Daniel, let me go to you first. You know, my jaw hit the floor when the first time it was mentioned. Here's a foreign policy swamp creature that has a record longer than both our arms and legs combined of just tragedy, of mistakes, poor judgment, and never being held account for it. And she's up for what will be, if elected, the most powerful person in the world if she's vice president under Joe Biden. Your thoughts?
That's a good way of putting it, Peter, because Biden is not going to be running very much if he is elected. That's for sure. It is going to be Susan Rice. And Susan Rice does not only exercise bad judgment, she is willfully malicious. She's at the center of the entire Russiagate fiasco. She was critical as the person who unmasked the individuals in the Trump campaign that the intelligence agencies were spying on in an attempt to overthrow an American election. She is in the center of all this. The widely misinterpreted actions in Benghazi that Americans still don't have any idea what it was really about. This woman is at the center of every piece of chaos and mayhem around. She is the most dangerous choice, I think, for vice president, for those of us who value peace and non-intervention.
George, I mean, I couldn't think of a worse person, to be perfectly honest with you, because, I mean, this is a foreign policy ideologue, okay? And she represents a group of people in Washington, the swamp, that has made it adamantly clear that American foreign policy will be bipartisan. I don't see, you know, a lot of Republicans out there, you know, outraged by all this. Okay, I mean, it is a continuation. It will be as if Trump never happened. Okay, because it's telling the electorate you don't have a choice when it comes to foreign policy. And lo and behold, she has no views on domestic policy whatsoever. Your thoughts, George?
Yes, she is a rabid interventionist. She is a rabid humanitarian interventionist. She has never met any intervention that she didn't favor. The moment there's any talk of any withdrawal of U.S. forces from anywhere, she pops up to express horror and anguish, and all hell is going to break loose on the world if a single U.S. soldier withdraws from Afghanistan, withdraws from Syria, withdraws from Iraq, even withdraws from Germany 75 years after the end of World War II. So that's her mindset. And that's entirely the mindset of the intelligence services. It's the mindset of the mainstream media. And yes, that's the person who will almost certainly not just be running things. I mean, it's more than likely, as you and I, Peter, have discussed, that Biden will just step aside after a few months and simply, hand the reins over to Susan Rice. So can you imagine the absolute horror show that the world is in for under a President Susan Rice? I mean, what we've seen in Libya and what we've seen in Syria are nothing to what we're going to see.
Just to echo what you were saying there, I mean, the 25th Amendment will be a very serious issue if Joe Biden becomes president of the United States. And we all have to take that seriously. But Daniel, the foreign interventionism, the way it's always presented is that America must stand strong. America must be involved because of our values and norms. But I mean, Susan Rice is the poster child of the military-industrial complex. This is who her constituents are. This is she represents them, and that's why she's going to get this kind of support. And on top of it, even we said in a previous video, I mean, can you commit perjury on television? Well, if you can, she has repeatedly, particularly on a PBS program about the unmasking. She said she didn't know anything about it. And I remember that very clearly because she used a double negative, which kind of tells me something about what's, was bouncing around in her brain. Okay. Because I think she knew that she was telling a lie and it came out very badly. Of course, there was no pushback. We have evidence that she has lied, at least to the public, when it comes to Benghazi, when it comes to unmasking. And then the last day, the last hour in the White House, she writes a message to herself saying, we did it all by the book. I mean, but the media won't really penetrate. Those three easy things they won't talk about.
They won't talk about it. And it's not that she lies about things so much that she's in the center of these things. She's in the center of the Russiagate fiasco. As to your previous point about we have to be involved, otherwise what will the world do without us? If there was just one example of a place that was left better by U.S. intervention, we might be quiet a little bit, but there's never a single example of that. What's interesting, I was just reading a piece in The Atlantic, I think it just came out the last day or two, but Susan Rice was interviewed just before the inauguration, and they asked her, Mrs. Rice, one reporter said, what is it that keeps you up at night? And she said, a pandemic that spirals out of control. That's very interesting if you think about what's happened this year in 2020. She said, we set up an office in the White House to handle global pandemics, and President Trump disbanded this, and look what's happened now. Look at how horribly he's handled this pandemic. Millions of lives, so many Americans have died because of him. This is in January of 2017. She said, a pandemic is what keeps her up at night. Knowing her lack of any sort of moral standards, I do wonder, of course, we do know there is a virus out there, but I do wonder how much of this hyping was for political reasons and how much she was in the center of this entire thing in the pre-planning stages.
If staying with you, Daniel, if you look at the response to the virus all around the world, it's only in very specific places where it's politicized, and it's politicized the most in the United States by far. The country where I live right now in Russia, it's not a political issue. It's how to manage it, how to manage the issue. And there's a wide universal consensus about that. People are not arguing about masks or what political party you belong to or who you like or who you dislike. It's a society grappling with an issue here. George, I mean, I guess listening to what we just heard from Daniel, Susan Rice is going to keep me up at night if she gets her hands on power. Go ahead.
Yes, yeah, no, exactly. And when you think of the recklessness with which she embarked on the Libya adventure. And remember all the lies that she spread about the genocide forthcoming in Benghazi. You remember the Viagra story about how Gaddafi was feeding his soldiers Viagra in order they could commit mass rapes. And of course, she was involved in the actual assassination, a very serious war crime of Gaddafi. So all of that, this is a real monster. And of course, the point that you make about the lies that she tells you something about her moral character. I mean, it's all part and parcel. I mean, remember when she said that thing in that memo about President Obama said everything must be done by the book. Remember, 3 times she said that. Yeah, 3 times she said that. Now, we have now had a number of people testifying about that January the 5th meeting. Not one person has said that Obama said everything must be done by the book. So she made that whole thing up and repeated it. Obama said everything must be done by the book. But apparently Comey missed that by the book. Strzok missed that thing by the book. Yates missed that thing by the book. But she did that. In other words, she always eating lies.
I guess the question, George, is what book is she talking about?
Well, yes, quite. Because the one thing we do know is what Obama said, we need the right person to investigate Flynn. Find the right person.
Okay, Daniel, I want to finish up with this. Probably the first time in my lifetime, maybe in history, Susan Rice is a known quantity for a lot of conservatives and people in the GOP, and she is not a liked person. She's very much like a Hillary Clinton. You feel one way or the other. Very few people are neutral, particularly people that are interested in politics. Could this actually help Trump in this election?
Well, I don't know how much it will help Biden because
well, certainly, yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what Susan Rice comes from Washington, D.C. What Biden desperately needs is a very prominent vice presidential candidate who can deliver a swing state. He needs someone who can deliver Texas or Florida, and she won't be able to do that. I don't, frankly, quite understand what she brings to the ticket in terms of purely electoral votes.
She's from Maine, right?
Yes, but I think she grew up in D.C.
Oh, that's going to be a real.
Oh, you got Maine. Good for you. But the other thing is what she brings to the office if she is a vice president. It is a bit like Cheney, but think about the people who we kept trying to forget for the last 4 years, who suddenly are going to be on everyone's minds. People like Evelyn Farkas, massive neocon in the Pentagon, in the Obama administration. Think about the entire Kagan family, Kimberly Kagan, all of these Democrat neocons. They're already sniffing around Biden's basement. You better believe it. And these are the people that are going to come to the forefront. It's important who's the VP, but remember, it's more important in a way who's the assistant vice president, deputy assistant secretary of state, and all of these sort of lower tiers, because they're the ones that make policy. Yeah. And all these creeps are going to go back. They came out, they're going to come back out of the woodwork and take up their positions.
The interagency consensus.
Yes,
okay.
Exactly.
If you ever meet that person, introduce me. Okay. All right, George. I think one thing that we learned from all of this is be careful of basement snippers. Okay. All right. I want to thank Daniel. I want to thank both of you, Daniel and George, for joining me here on the Gaggle. We'll see you next time and real soon. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.